Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ron Amlin from SBM St. Louis, and we are honored today to have the man, the myth, and the legend, Jeremy Nulik, who is a futurist at Big Wide Sky. He's with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about culture. Jeremy, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you spending your time with us.
Thank you for having me, Ron. I appreciate that intro, especially because at one point you employed me. That's a very flattering introduction. So
well, let's talk about your background and
Sure.
and Big Wide Sky and what you guys are doing for businesses in the region and around the country, actually.
Sure thing, man. So you know, I think I have you to thank in a lot of ways for a good portion of my background. When I started working with you and with the good people at SBM, that's when I started to get to meet really interesting people. Previous to that, I'd been a communicator, storyteller, and worked, in any number of capacities. Like, if you show any kind of aptitude, and you're familiar with this personally, Ron, if you show any aptitude at all for like putting words together, people are like, cool, can you write this or that? So I had been a kind of person who could put words together. And so people hired me to do stuff like that. And when I met up with you and with Pat and everybody at SBM, you guys really had this notion that there were these unsung, untold stories about innovators, entrepreneurs in the St. Louis area. And when I started telling those stories, that's when I realized that there was this intersection that I was fascinated by. And it had to do with the kind of people, that telling the stories of the kind of people who aren't easily defined in any category, and so they have an innovative way of seeing the world, or they have something interesting they're trying to build. And you could tell stories all day about that. And I know that that's what motivates you. And that's really where I came from. And so if you carry that forward into, any of the work that we're doing at Big Wide Sky and the awesome team of creative people there, is really just what that work is about is taking all of that fascination with imagination, with having vision beyond your circumstances, and applying it to business challenges. So the way that we try to encapsulate a lot of what we say we do is we make business more human. I think it's easy to say, like, hear that and go, oh, you make people nice, and that's not actually what we mean. Because if you think about the qualities of a human, and you think about sort of the natural laws that exist, and this relates to culture, about people, human beings are integral. We have a lot of components that make us up, a lot of systems, a lot of understanding. We have our consciousness, we have our bodies, we have all kinds of things, and all of them need to work together to do anything meaningful. And human beings, like I said, have vision beyond their circumstances. There's not any other species that does that. We can create imaginal spaces, and we're also made up of natural laws and social contracts. And there's natural ways that we start to agree with how we deal with one another. And business can benefit from the application of some of the principles behind those. And so that's what we do for businesses. We work on innovation approaches. We work with the seemingly sort of intractable kind of crises, moments that happen because of growth or change or disruption. And we do it in a way that uses foresight. We use communications. A lot of us at Big White Sky are former communicator people like me. And we work on culture. And, in particular, why we're fascinated with culture, and I think I'm skipping ahead to one of your questions that you probably programmed, is there's two stories around why it is we deal with culture. The first reason is that, we as former communicators had experiences where someone would present to you what they believe to be a communications challenge. So, hey, we want a cooler way to talk about our brand to this audience. And then you would apply all kinds of resources, time, creative people to solving that problem. And you'd make this really cool campaign, or you'd build a cool experience for users of the brand via the website or what have you. And then when the user would go to actually interact with the human beings inside the organization, that entire promise was completely gone, and you've had that experience as a user, I'm sure, right? Like, I think my best example of it is when it's like Holiday Inn, right? Like, there was a period of time where Holiday Inn had the coolest like advertising campaigns. But then when you stayed at a Holiday Inn, your experience there was very different, than the promises that they made you. And so if that happens enough times to you and you're a creative person who has any kind of ethics or fiber at all, you start going, can we fix the deeper issue, which is you're not really calibrated or even aligned to wanting to solve this problem for your audience. Or if you really want to solve that problem, we should align the human beings in your organization behind it. This is even backed up by the work of this guy named Stuart Brand. He's a futurist, and he actually has a pace layer to how he believes change occurs. And, you know, at the top of it is the stuff that you can see, like the elements that are visible to everyone. Right below that are systems that create the governance models responsible for building them, right? So it's this very heady sort of thing. The only point of it being at the bottom of this pace layer, the slowest moving layer, is culture. You know, it's the human beings and the unwritten rules that guide how we deal with one another, the social contracts that exist, the myths and the stories we tell each other. Those things are actually fundamental to the changes you're trying to make that are visible. And if you're not conscious of at least being intentional with saying, where are we really? And what change do we really want to take on? Then what you can do is you'll make changes up here on this layer that everybody sees. And if it's not supported by the culture will just swallow that thing up.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. For my brief time as a business consultant, we would go out and try to get a business system in place in a lot of companies, and in some of these companies, we would leave and really scratch our heads and say, you know, there's no way in hell what we just did is going to work, because the culture is so messed up there that no system is really going to work until they really solve the foundational issue of their culture. And you know, we're just wasting our time here, and it happen more often than not.
Well, that's
And you
why
know,
Office
culture.
Space is funny, right? I mean, why
Yeah,
Office
yeah.
Space is funny is because everybody's been in the culture where some jackass, you know, who's probably well intentioned, put up a big banner that said like, how is this good for the company, or some kind of aligning phrase, and it felt empty to you, and it did because it didn't connect to what you really valued, and nobody ever even inquired what you value. That's why that's funny. You know, it's like relatable, you know? So, see, that's how the culture will swallow it up. You were going to ask me a question. I interrupted you.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been around businesses for more than 20 years, and 25 years ago, people didn't talk about culture. I mean, business owners never talked about culture. I mean, culture
Right.
was, you know, here's your desk, here's your cube, go over there, do your job, shut up. And maybe in 3 or 4 years, you know, if you do okay, maybe you'll get a raise or a promotion, but that was culture, you know.
Right.
And then now everybody is talking about culture. So you've been
Right.
around you've been around good cultures, you've seen bad cultures. Give us the 5 things companies can do to improve their cultures.
Yeah, I really sucked at making 5 things, that much I'll tell you. I think if you can
What
do,
about 2.5?
if you can do one, like, I think that you're doing great. First of all, maybe 0.5, and I'll just throw it out there. I mean, making assumptions about, you know, who's going to see this. You know, it's likely that if you're the kind of person, first of all, who's started something, or you're a founder, or you're in a position like you are, you've got a lot of hats you've got to wear. You've got to, you know, you're trying to look out for your financial systems. You're trying to map a growth strategy. You're dealing with pandemic crisis. You're dealing with a lot. So the first 0.5 step is probably let yourself off the hook if once in a while people complain about working with you or for you or whatever. It's okay, right? It happens to everybody. But so you raise a good point, you know, of the whole trend in the thing. And really it's I think that if we still lived in a world, I think, that didn't have as much emergent and inbound change as we do now, that dealing with culture in a kind of siloed way, you know, this is the HR person who's in charge of fielding your complaints about whether or not you like your desk, that would be fine. The issue is that we're dealing with uncertainty at levels that a lot of people are just not comfortable with. But the benefit and the good thing is, you know, if you are watching this and you care about culture, is that humans are the best attenuated to dealing with uncertainty. It's not your systems aren't necessarily, but your humans are. And so I think if you I was going to run through 5 things, but I think that to do the best job I can do, I really want to say, the first thing I think would be the most important. And the first thing has to do with the category of vision. Um, all human beings have the capability of having imagination and creating preferred futures. And as much as this seems like finger painting, or perchance like, just like navel gazing or whatever, we've seen, you and I, Ron, both, we've seen this with people like Ari Weinswig at Zingerman's community of businesses, who right now has been publishing all kinds of articles about how he's dealing with the pandemic. But also, years ago, realized like we need to have a collective North Star on where we're headed. And we've got to get real about this. Like we're not going to, just keep trying to just make stuff to make stuff. And at the time, he and Paul just had this deli, and it's like, where are we really going with this business? What does it really mean? And he decided to like inject that crisis. Well, now everybody's at that crisis point, and so that it's a simple thing to do. But in particular, what you'd want to do is to gather the stakeholders, like the people that you think are the closest to making a meaningful go at what it is you're trying to make as an organization. And you challenge each other. Hey, write me a day in the life 5 years from now of who we are and what we are. Allow for some time. Let yourself express those ideas. Make it as tangible as you can. And then what you can have is a conversation about the future. You can have a conversation with those stakeholders that takes place in the future. And the reason for this is oftentimes I think culture falls into like a break fix kind of model, similar to like you trying to fix your IT, right? Hey, Susie doesn't get along with so-and-so because they took this filing cabinet, or this happened over here, whatever. And it's like, suddenly like everything's important. When you don't have a vision, the way it feels is that everything's a priority, and everything feels like it's the end of the world, and when you can have an articulation of where you're headed and a North Star, I think what's amazing, and you can allow for this to occur, what happens in the mental model of you and the people that are closest to your vision, the people that are closest to making sure your business does well, it will suddenly become obvious what the priorities are. Well, the priorities need to be, the biggest blocker to us getting to this preferred future is XYZ. So if we make that a priority, we can pursue that, and it feels good. And you can begin to flex emergent systems. And you can begin to say, well, who are the people in our organization who are most talented at that? So if you do nothing else, like that takes almost no time. You don't have to hire anybody to do it, and everybody can do it. And the degree of your excellence, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is that you make that effort.
And you've done that. You've taken companies through that vision process. What do they say after they've done this? I mean, or what are their viewpoints on the exercise, and how valuable was it for them?
Well, I think overall, probably the top thing that happens, or that we hear from people, outside of the whole like, we don't usually talk in our company this way, is I was more open to change than I realized I would be. I mean, and some of the work that we do around foresight isn't necessarily dealing with your preferred vision. A lot of the work that we'll do is saying, why don't we simulate a reality for you on your behalf? And we'll give you what that simulated reality is. And then let's just play a game inside of that simulated reality. And what starts to emerge, what people start to have conversations about, are the things that really matter to them. This happened. We had an agriculture client, and they were charged. This organization was charged with trying to increase the preference and the openness to the purchase of U.S. ag goods by European processors, manufacturers, right? And as nerdy as that sounds, or maybe perhaps as uninteresting as that sounds, that would be akin to saying like, hey, could you consider a new religion, right? Would you like to just consider a new religion today? Because a lot of the issues that they were dealing with were on the level of belief, right? There is a presumption that United States produced goods aren't following the sustainability guidelines that Europeans prefer. And in some ways they were right. You know, a lot of the US companies are not signing sustainability agreements, et cetera, what have you. So this organization was constantly faced with the battle. Like they were constantly making a battle space to fight and shout down what they believed to be misconceptions about what it is that they were doing. In turn, what that created then was infighting. So then if you're constantly fighting, then you're constantly fighting with each other too. Like you don't shut that off just because you're talking to each other. So then this is just what happened, you know? So this is the impact of culture, right? It's the unwritten kind of rule that we fight. And so what we were able to say is, well, what if we put you in a different reality and had you play a game? And what came out of that game was they realized that one of the principles that they really needed to embrace and something they wanted was that every time they made a decision about communication, that it had to have a positive expression of the benefits and the intentions of United States projects. Now, the difference, that might sound like a no-duh statement, but if you had that and it's in writing and it's a principle that you have and it's a belief you have to have a positive expression all the time, that has an impact then on the decisions you make. So when we're faced with a new challenge and a new person comes along, are we going to go into battle space or are we going to make a positive expression? Again, it sounds squidgy, perhaps, but you know, that kind of thing began to change the mental model that these people had when they dealt with each other. And even I'm referencing back to Ari. He's got a saying that he says, "You can't build anything positive from a negative vision. You can't. Now you can start a revolution. You could start the French Revolution. You could overthrow the government. You can make a coup, but you can't. If, as indicated by the French Revolution, you can't replace it with anything. You don't have anything there, you know. So you need a positive vision. Human beings work based on the images of the future that they hold. That's part of the work we do as futurists at Big Wide Sky. But it's something that everybody can embrace. You don't have to be a futurist to understand that. If you have images of the future that are solidified and you understand and you know what you're pursuing, you can communicate that, you can inspire your culture with it, you can calibrate decisions, things will start to become more obvious, you know?
I had a business owner, now he's got 80 some odd employees, and he told me this recently. He said, you know, him speaking, I could have more of an impact on my employees getting divorced than anybody else in their lives. And I started to think about that. And
Yeah.
when you think about it, you know, if they feel devalued at work, and if they just feel horrible about themselves at work, when they go home, you know, who are they going to take that out on? You know, their relationships are going to suffer. And
Sure.
it really made me think about culture, because if this young man who owns this 80-person business has more of an impact on his employees' marriages than anybody else in the world, I mean, that says a lot about the responsibility of business owners trying to build a culture where people come in and feel safe, and they feel like they're valued, and they feel, you know, like they're being respected.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, the cost is yeah, and the cost benefit is high on culture. Absolutely. And you know, it's part of why we do, I mean, not to again go back to a Big Wide Sky sort of sales line, but part of the reason we want to do our work in business is for that reason. You know, it's like business is where this stuff can actually take place. We can, because it is the thing that, you know, it's harder to have this take place, let's say with the government, right? Or you know, certainly not trying to push any kind of agenda at all, but let's just say trust in every government institution's gone down, and that's across the board. You know, it used to take place with other institutions that we had as communities, but anymore, like you're saying, a lot of identity, a lot of our time, a lot of our resources is devoted to what we do as a business, in business settings, in organizational settings. Even if you work for a nonprofit, that's a nonprofit business. It is an organization of human beings together to try to create something in the world. You know, so What are you creating? And if you don't know that, like everything will seem important. Every little you know, seeming little discrepancy will get overblown, and you will end up in meeting after meeting with, you know, Susan and Michael, because they need to argue over whose filing cabinet this is. And that is what's going to kill your vision, and kill your intention with your culture. And a lot of it starts with vision. You know, there's a lot you can do after. There's got to be 4 other things I could name for you, and I've got them. But I think that if you don't do that, if you don't do the vision thing, a lot of
The
the other
other
things,
things won't matter. Yeah,
it
I
won't
think it's
matter.
great advice. I think
Yeah,
every
I mean,
company should do that. Should create their vision and get their employees involved in that. And
make it fun, make it something imaginable, make it a competition. Like there's no rules on this. The only thing that you want to do is to be thorough, and you want it to follow. I think the best visions I've seen, they're inspiring, so they have to have an element of some kind of story that's interesting, that you want to know, right? So borrow from good storytellers, tell something interesting. But they're strategically sound, so they're based on trends that are happening in your industry. They're based on evidence that you have from your past, that you can show people that this is what we're really about and who we are. Um, you know, and outside of that, go back to your origin story for your inspiration for your vision. You know, if you are the founder of the thing, or if it was founded by someone else, doesn't matter. Go back to that origin story. You know, look back to look forward. So look back at what that looked like. What were you responding to? You know, why did this thing begin its trajectory? And then let's figure out, where is it going? And it's also an exercise, like I said, you can enfranchise anybody to tell those stories. And you can do that in either you could do that virtually. You could do a Zoom. We're all going to tell our vision, and then we're just going to have a conversation about, well, why was that in your vision? And why were you missing this in your vision? Or, hey, I had this idea. Isn't this crazy? Whatever. You will begin to have a quality of conversation and connection with the human beings in your business that isn't about circumstances. It's about what can be. It's about your possibility. And that can serve as alignment no matter when you do it. You know, you can do it anytime, and you don't have to hire anybody to do it. Everybody can do it.
yeah, I
So
love it. Well, thank you for spending time with us today, talking about culture and building a vision. Now, if we want to get in touch with Big Wide Sky, what's the best way?
well, you know, and similar to even the joke that you've made, you could go to bigwidesky.com. So you could go to bigwidesky.com. You can find us. You can find me. It's easy to find us. You can find us in all of the social medias, all the things. Um, you know, we do have on our website, we've got a publishing platform we call Lift, and that's got articles, and we're constantly updating with new insights, things we're learning, tools we're making. And we invite people to even sessions. We like to guinea pig groups of people when we make new ways that we can contend with the unknown, with uncertainty, with how to make change happen. So if you go to Lyft on the website, you can see a lot of those resources, and get connected.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and best of luck to you. And we'll certainly check out the website and all the great stuff you guys are doing.
Thanks, Ron.